Today we're in my blueberry row and we're going to talk about all things blueberries. Well, at least what's going on with my blueberry plants. Welcome to Homemaker Living. My name is Teresa, and I've been gardening for about 17 years, but I've only been growing blueberries for maybe the past 8 years, and that would be in our 2 previous homes we had blueberries as well, and I had really good luck with them. Your typical homeowner, you want to grow some fruit, you go to the store, you buy some blueberries, you plop them in the ground, you might do a little bit of reading about them, what to feed them, water them, etc. And, I followed all those basic rules. And like I said, in the last 2 locations, I had really good success. I had healthy plants, green plants. They produced a lot of fruit. And so with that mindset, moving to this location, I just kind of followed those same steps. And my plan was to grow maybe 5 or 6 blueberry plants here. I have a rather large garden and I did want to upscale it to produce a little bit more food than our last place. And I had 4 blueberry bushes there, and they were a bit to keep up with and harvesting and getting everything taken care of through the year. So I thought, well, if I add 1 or 2 plants, I can handle that. And so I actually have more than that, and there's a little bit of a story behind that. But essentially this year, what I'm struggling with is, as I did last year as well, is my blueberry plants are not thriving. And I did a little research last year. I didn't test my soil or anything, but assumed it was the pH level was not good and they needed to be fed more. So I did the basic, feeding them an acid mix fertilizer from down to earth, as well as make sure they got adequate water. I think I added some peat moss and some compost to it as well, hoping that would right the problem. And they did not even okay last year. I'll say a couple of plants I was able to harvest on, but the newer, younger bare root plants were not doing well. And so I thought, well, this year when it starts, I'm going to be more on top of it and watch them closely and make sure I get it under control if there's a problem. And so I did that. So as the season started, I made sure I fed them according to the things that I've read. And some of them are doing okay, but a couple of them are super yellow and the rest of them are kind of in the middle. And I'm struggling to right that soil. So let me give you a little bit of history of the plants I have and how I ended up with these plants, and then we'll get into how I'm trying to treat the soil and improve that soil. So starting right here at the end of my raspberry row, I plan to start the blueberries going down this row, as I refer to it as blueberry row. And I plan to only put in, like I said, 5, maybe 6 bushes here. And so I thought I would start here. And I wanted to get some Duke. That's what I had at our last house. So what I did was I spaced them out. I think they're 4 feet apart. And I counted out 6. And I started here. I don't know what the variety of this one is, but this one came from my daughter-in-law when they moved out of state. It was in a grow bag, and the intention was to take it to them, but the time was never right with the season, and I felt that the plant may fail. So ended up hanging around with us for so long that I decided to finally just plop it in the ground because it was suffering. And she's really come back. Again, I don't know the variety, but she's at least green and has some blossoms on her. And I call her the OG. She's a little cranky. She's a little sticky, but she's still hanging in there. So we got her going on. And then here, one of them that I bought 2 years ago, it did not survive this last winter. So I went ahead and grabbed this Duke from Costco and popped it in the ground, and then we had a couple of freezes, and looks like it's had a little bit of leaf loss, but at least it's green and it looks like it's doing okay. These other 2 little small bush varieties, I'll put the name on the screen here, that were like this last year. They both were super yellow. They were in the ground, and they just never ever were green. They produced some berries. I was able to get some off of them, but not healthy at all. So I popped those out of the ground yesterday because my intent is to not leave them here. They are a like a container variety. They're very small, apparent blueberry bush from my understanding. So I thought this maybe wasn't the best environment for them. So I'll do something else with them, but I'll talk about what I did with them when I potted them up yesterday. And then we come to space number 5 and 6, which these are a Duke variety. They were bare root when I purchased them, and I thought I was getting 2. So it was at the end of the season. I went to a nursery, perfect. I had 2 spots left, and they were blowing them out at like $10, or they were in a bucket, and she's like, well, I'll give you the bucket for $20. So grabbed them, brought them home. Turned out there was more than 2 in there. There was 12. So I was hopeful that they would do okay, within a couple of years, and they haven't really changed a whole lot. They're still pretty spindly, only a little bit of green on the top. This one at least has got some green on it. It's not doing too bad, but the lower leaves are a little yellow. So what happened was I planted these 2 here to make my 6. But then I had so many extra, I thought, oh, well, what the heck, let's just throw them in here. So I added 4 more here. And as you can see, they're all still really just spindly. And, they are actually looking better than they did last year. Surprisingly, they don't look that great. Just these little sticks with some green on top. And of course, it's got some blossoms this year. It did not have any blossoms last year, so I guess that's a plus. And it could be because I've done the fertilizing this year. But at any rate, I ended up with 10 blueberry bushes, way more than I wanted. So if they don't all survive, I guess that's okay. But I do have two new ones going in these 2 spots. My sister picked them up for me at Costco. Ours didn't have any, and I got a Patriot, and I think the other one's a Bluebell. And see if I can get a picture of those in here. But at any rate, so then that would give me at least the 6 that I originally wanted to start with. The OG, this Duke, the Patriot, the Bluebell, and 2 more Dukes. And if these don't do well, I may replace them with something else, a little bushier, a little healthier, give me a better start. And then we'll just see what happens with the rest of them. So as I mentioned earlier, I did not test my soil last year. I just assumed it was a pH issue and was a little bit more diligent making sure I fed them their acidic mixed food from Down to Earth, which has worked for me really well in the past. And also that peat moss and that compost, making sure they have adequate water. I went ahead this year and thought, well, since I'm already seeing those yellowing leaves on the littlest plants, I better go ahead and get my soil tested. So this is a test that I've used for a number of years and have always been satisfied with the basic results it gives you. It's not going to give you anything like the soil test I sent in earlier on my garden beds, where it gives you a little bit more in-depth of your numbers for your macro and your micronutrients. This is just going to give you a baseline about where you fall in the color chart and give you an idea of what you might need to do. It's really quite informative. Inside this pamphlet, it tells you obviously how to use the test, but also based on your results, what you'll need to use to improve your soil or change your soil. So I did that. I don't want to get into all the minutiae of this test because that's not what this is about, other than just the results itself. So basically what you do is you dig down in your soil and you get out go down about 4 or 5 inches, get out a sample of soil that doesn't have any debris in it, like big rocks or wood or anything like that, and just try to get the soil itself. And then you do 1 part soil to 5 parts of water. You shake it up for about a minute, and then you let it sit. And then as it sits, you actually can see your soil composition to see what type of soil you have. So in this case, I don't know if you can see it very well. Let's see if I can get it up here. You can see I have a lot of sand, which I knew I had. I've got this little layer of silt here. And then, of course, all the water. And I've got some debris in here floating from the compost. So at any rate, that's a way to see what type of soil composition you have as well. But in this case, it was to get the water sample to do the test. And then you just fill all the chambers with the water. And then you put in the little, it has little capsules. You put the additives in, shake them up, let them sit for 10 minutes, and then you get your reading. And so what I learned from my test, again, this is those basic numbers, is My pH is neutral, which typically you want your pH to be neutral for growing most of your veggies. I think anywhere between 6.5 to 7-ish. Mine was 7. But blueberries require between 4 and 6, and optimal it would be 5. So obviously I'm 2 numbers higher than I want to be. And then it also showed that my nitrogen was completely depleted. I had no nitrogen, which is not surprising. My phosphorus, your NP, your P, um, was sufficient, so I don't have to do any changes there. And then my potash, which is your K, was depleted as well. I didn't have anything there. So then I went through the guide and told me what I needed to add and how much per your square footage. And so it's essentially what it came down to is I need to add some sulfur. I also have nitrogen. I have a bag of blood meal. The only thing I don't have is the potash. You can use green sand, which you can purchase, kelp, or probably a box product, which I have used before from Down to Earth. I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. Langbeinite. I'll put a picture here of it. I think the numbers are 0022. You can use peat moss to help acidify the soil as well. But the key to all of this is that it's not an overnight change. This takes quite a long time for those things to break down, microorganisms in the soil to break all of that down so that it's available for the plants. What I read was it could take a couple of years. So it's not very encouraging, but obviously 2 years from now, if it works, then that would be great. It's better to start with your soil before you plan to plant. And if your soil is not appropriate, it could take that year to 2 to right the soil before you plant. And that's the preferred method. I obviously have my plants in the ground except for those 2 holes, but I'm going to be putting plants in there. So the non-preferred method is doing it surface. Once you have those plants in the ground and their roots are established, then trying to get all of those amendments into the soil around those roots without disturbing anything is quite challenging, and it is the lesser effective of the 2 methods. So that's the method I'm going to choose to use this year. I'm going to make sure I gather all of those items and see what I can do to work that into the soil. And I'm probably not going to really see any results, I'm guessing, until maybe next year. It also said to test your soil, I think like monthly, to see if you need to add more, because you don't want to overdo it or underdo it. You have to find that sweet spot, or test your soil every 6 months to see how you're doing, so that you can continue to modify it so that you're achieving those results sooner than later, because later obviously results in what I have in struggling plants. So let me show you the products that I have on hand, and then I'll get to modifying the soil. This is the prilled sulfur, and it is derived from elemental sulfur, and what I read said that I could use this to lower that pH. And then I have this blood meal that I use to put nitrogen in all my beds. It's 1200. And then I actually did have a box of this Langbeinite 0022. So I've got this potassium 22, and I think I might have enough in there to use. If not, it'll get me started. And I have this Canadian peat moss on hand as well. So earlier I mentioned I popped these 2 blueberry plants out of the ground, and their root balls were not big at all. Like I said, they probably were this size around. I had lots of room on the edges to add all the soil back in here. And they were only probably, that deep maybe. They weren't that big at all. So what I did was I took some bag soil that I have, then I took all of those elements that I just showed you, and I mixed everything up in a bucket, and then I put a nice layer on the bottom and added the root ball in there, and then packed it nicely around it, as well as adding some of that down-to-earth acidic mix food for them as well. So I made sure to get that in there too. There's got a lot of peat moss in here too. That's supposed to help lower that pH. The other thing that I did that I did not mention earlier was that for a quick result to acidify the soil, which is short term, it's suggested doing it every couple of weeks, was to water them with water with a little bit of vinegar in it. So it was 2 tablespoons of vinegar to 1 gallon of water. And so I went ahead and did that, hoping that maybe, just throw everything at it and see if that helps. So I watered them with that as well, kind of like a little guinea pig to see how that works, since I know everything that I did here in the soil is long-term and the vinegar water hopefully is short-term. Based on the recommendation of how much to add of each amendment for each plant, I went ahead and calculated out based on about 2 square feet, since that's about how big each of the planting areas are. And I calculated all of that out based on that, and then I went ahead and used these little yogurt cups, and just so I could have a production line and I wasn't measuring out each one as I went ahead and filled up 9 of these little yogurt cups with each of the amendments. And I'll go ahead and do this last one. Thought I'd just show you how I'm doing that last one. I'm using this little scale from the house. I want to be as precise as possible so that as I move through this process, I'll know exactly where I started and exactly how much I added. So I have it on ounces now, and according to my calculation in my note here, I need 1/2 ounce of this sulfur. This is that elemental prilled sulfur. So I'll just measure out, clear out my weight here from the cup, and then I'll measure out 1/2 ounce, which is 0.5. And then I need 3/4 ounce of blood meal, and clear out the weight again. And then this is that langbonite. I thought I didn't have enough. This stuff goes a long way. I've had this box for several years, brought it from my old garden, and turns out I had plenty to go ahead and do this. And so it's just this little crystal type granular. There we go. Good measure, a little bit extra. Okay, so now I've got all my 10 cups ready. Go ahead and stick them in the tray to take them out easily, and then I'll get started with working that into the soil. My plan is to use my broad fork, work it around the root ball, get in there and move the soil a little bit, and then I'll use my hori to get down there and loosen it up as much as I can, maybe about 4 or 5 inches deep. And then I'll work the amendments in there as far as I can get it, and then hopefully when watering it, it'll help wash those nutrients a little bit farther down into the soil. And I almost forgot about the peat moss. Got to get that worked in there too. One thing I will not do this time is use this acid mix. Maybe a week or so ago, I went ahead and put a good couple handfuls in there already, so I don't want to overdo that. Well, that went better than expected. The broad fork going in was pretty easy getting in there and moving it around. Didn't feel any resistance with that. Using the hori, trying to get down about 3 or 4 inches to loosen up the soil a little bit more, I felt some resistance, so I didn't want to push it and then perhaps disturb more roots. I didn't really feel like I did anything with the roots, but who knows. So you saw me add the all those amendments in there, mix it in as best I could, added a little bit of peat moss to help lower that pH, and then topped it with some peat moss. And so now I just got to go ahead and try to get these other 9 plants done. It looks like we've got some weather moving in, so hopefully I can get that done before something happens. I quickly moved through these next 5 areas trying to beat the weather that I thought was coming in, but now it looks like it's breaking up. There were no surprises there. The soil worked just as it did on that first one I showed you up close. Today I share this process with you in hopes that somebody may be able to glean some information from it to help them if they're having some type of soil issue. I know that my particular problem and resolution may not be the same for someone else. I would suggest that you do your own research and for your area and for what plants you might be having issues with. But maybe that just gives you a little bit of encouragement to do that. I have no idea if this is going to work for me. All I can do is do the research, do what I've learned, apply it, and then see how it works out. I'm hopeful that within a year, by next year, I'll have maybe some bigger plants and more green and more blossoms. That's our hope, right? We don't want to spend our time gardening and putting all this time and effort into things and then to not have a harvest. I don't mind a little work. I don't mind doing those extra things, but I certainly would like to be able to benefit from it as well. So hopefully you found something in this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel so you can follow me along with me on my journey of planting out my garden and the results of the work I'm doing on the blueberries. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.